Hey, it's Yanez, and welcome to another episode of Pawd Slama Jama. It's officially game week, not just any game week, Big 12 game week, the first game ever for the Houston Cougars football team. As a member of the Big 12 Conference is right around the corner, September 2. Houston will be hosting UTSA. If we're going to get right into, there's nothing else that we have to talk about other than Houston UTSA football week.
Got high standards, high goals, and we know what it takes to get there.
I want to be unguardable, if I'm honest.
Coaches coach, players play.
And that's a great place to be in your life. Where you could care less what other people think.
Joining me as always, Dunlap. How you doing, sir?
All is well, all is well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. So let's get right into it. Like we mentioned, it's game week after the long off season, after spring trainings, the spring practices, spring balls, the off season workouts into the summer. It's here. It's Monday. We're going to hear from head coach Dana Holgorsen. On Tuesday, we'll hear from the players. And then Saturday, there will be an official football game. The Houston Cougars, as a member of the Big 12 Conference, will be hosting UTSA at TDECU Stadium. Couldn't be a much more exciting time because finally, once fall starts, football season, best time of the year.
Best time of the year. I was happy with the little appetizer of games we got this weekend. And so I can't wait. I'm happy. I'm anticipating the full list of games throughout the entire weekend.
So let's start with the headline, which of course is Donovan Smith. He's finally was officially named the quarterback one, the starter for the Houston Cougars on August 19th during the Fan Fest that they had ahead of the 2023 season. Not really much of a surprise when it came to when Donovan Smith committed to the Houston Cougars and the hype video that dropped when he officially made his announcement, kind of the passing of the torch that was symbolized when Tank and Clayton Tune were part of that video, the hype video to show that he had committed to Houston. Of course, when he announced the move, the Houston fans knew very well of Donovan Smith because of what he did to the Cougars a season ago in Lubbock and when he was a member of the Texas Tech Red Raiders. So, like I said, now that he's going to be officially the starter for the Houston Cougars, Dayon, I'll toss it over to you. What were your initial thoughts? Because there seems to be a lot of excitement, not only from head coach Dana Holgorsen, who gave him strong reinforcement that he is the team's quarterback one, but from players as well, specifically when it comes to the offensive lineman.
I wasn't really surprised. I think he kind of hinted at him leading the pack throughout the entire summer and I believe the fall or however long, whenever he arrived. And so I wasn't really surprised. And so then I just kind of started to watch some highlights, look into some of the numbers of what his time at Texas Tech. And rewatch the game against Houston and see just different games just to kind of see his playing style and actually see how he is versus kind of speculate. I know Houston's offense a little different. And when he explained the difference between the two, he said Texas Tech was a little faster and Houston's a little bit more versatile in the way that they attack. And so I'm excited to see what he could do leading Houston. I think it's kind of a fresh start, not only for him, but of course for Houston in a brand new conference. And for him, kind of being the guy, he was never the guy at Texas Tech. I mean, he was always inserted due to injury or something like that. He had some high moments and he had some low moments over the span. The games that he started last year, he started 7 of them. And he had some won 3 of those and lost 2 of those. I mean, you could look at the numbers, say he had some interceptions, a few touchdowns, but other than that, he can get the job done. So I can't wait to see him play and actually see how he's learned from the time he had at Tech. And now that he's the guy, he has the experience, he has the skill set. Now it's about seeing if he can put it all together.
Yeah, to add on to your point, I mean, heading into the season last year for Texas Tech, Donovan Smith wasn't penciled in to be the starter. He was going to be the backup to Tyler Shough, who suffered an injury, and that pushed Smith into that starting position for Texas Tech. Again, we saw firsthand what he did to Houston, but Smith was very instrumental in one of the arguably the biggest win for Texas Tech last season. That came against Texas, and just how well he played in that game against the Longhorns just goes to show what he can do in bits and pieces. And I wanted to mention something that was included in an article from the Houston Chronicle this morning or over the weekend that really just talked about Donovan Smith, and it kind of took his perspective going back to that game against Houston specifically, that 4th and 20 that we've really reiterated over the course of the past year, how close Houston was with escaping with a victory in Texas Tech. But in that article, Donovan Smith was quoted in saying when he went on the field, there was less than 40 seconds left on the game clock. Texas Tech trailed by 3 after Houston had just hit a go-ahead field goal. And Smith talks about how he could see fans starting to leave the stadium in Lubbock, and he didn't let that get to him. He stayed the course, he stayed calm, and he marched Texas Tech right down the field for the game-tying field goal, which ended up forcing overtime. And of course, we know what happened in overtime to the detriment of the Houston Cougars, but that just goes to show a little bit of the mental fortitude that Donovan Smith has.
Yeah, the composure that he has. And I think that those experiences right there is kind of what you lean on to see, okay, not only does he have the ability to stay calm in adverse situations, but he can actually lead and excel in those situations. So like I just said, with him being the guy noticeably and him kind of not really having to really look over his shoulder in the sense of I don't know, he hasn't said this, but you would think just being a player, not penciled in as the starter, then once you have a couple bad moments, I'm sure to play on your psyche. But I'm excited to see him, man. I think that does show his mental strength, but I'm excited for his versatility. One thing I did know, and I learned in watching the availability with the linebackers coach, Archie Manning, Donovan's dad and Archie has been friends for over 10 plus years. So that was the connection for him when he entered a transfer portal, which got him to Houston. So with that connection, for me, I think it says a lot with the connection that he has with that coaching staff and him really having a connection with Houston and wanted to make his own mark out from who he is as a quarterback and show that he can actually lead a team, especially in the Big 12. And so I think he's hungry, and I think he can lead Houston. How far he can lead Houston is yet to be determined.
How much versatility do you feel he adds to a potential Houston offense? Now, when we think of Clayton Tune, obviously we always talked about the experience that he brought to the table. He was a little bit of a dual threat, versatile quarterback as well. I feel like Donovan Smith, when it comes to just being an athlete, he could potentially be used much more as a weapon when it comes to being able to include using his legs much more often. Certainly much more frequently, maybe much more comfortable than the coaching staff was when Clayton Tune did it in years past.
Yeah, I think so. And I think not only that, I think why Houston didn't use Clayton Tune as much is because of depth behind him. They had a focus on not running him too much. And I think it's a focus on wanting to keep Donovan Smith healthy. But with Lucas behind him, I think they may be a little – I don't want to say that because that doesn't really sound good. But with his versatility, to your question, I think he adds just as much versatility as Clayton Tune. I think he's a little bit more of a power runner. I think he's more athletic, in my opinion, than Clayton Tune. So I think there will be more of an onus to have some quarterback run plays, some quarterback power plays, quick passing game. I think he likes to get the ball out quick, and he's decisive with the decision making. He will go through the reads, can read the field. But if you keep him ahead of the chains, allow his legs to be a factor, especially those 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, I think he can really be utilized a lot, especially in the goal line with his size and his strength. You think of like Cam Newton or a Josh Allen, how big they are and how they can run physically in the goal line inside the 20, inside the 10. I think you can really see his versatility a lot. And his arm strength, I mean, he can make all the throws from all across the field, down the field, deep ball accuracy. So I'm excited to see him for a full stretch of games to see how consistent he can be, because it was up and down through his time at Texas Tech. That's why in the time that he played, he didn't sustain and earn his way to be an outright starter.
We talked about his mental toughness, also noteworthy from that Houston Chronicle article. It also focused on his leadership, in particular when it comes to the trust he was able to build with his offensive lineman, in particular Jack Freeman, and his left tackle, Patrick Paul, as well. It was kind of funny when I was reading it. He said that they went 2 months, Jack Freeman specifically went 2 months without talking to Donovan Smith when he first transferred into the Cougars. And it slowly, gradually, that relationship built a trust. Obviously, we've heard about the getaway trip that all those three individuals had in Las Vegas, where Donovan Smith is from, and that's really where the team chemistry started to build from that point forward. And something that head coach Dana Holgorsen has said through the course of training camp availabilities, just how organic that process was, and how it really seems like he's been able to galvanize, in particular, not just the offensive line, but the entire offense around him. They see him as a clear-cut leader going forward and heading into the season.
I think when you're integrating yourself with a new team, new place, you want to be yourself and you don't want to force relationships. So I think that's to the benefit of himself and to his teammates accepting who he is and not trying to force relationships, because him coming in, he doesn't know the relationship that Jack may have had with Lucas. They could have been really close friends. So I think just naturally, like that organic play out, it was a good decision from him. He actually talked about that in his availability. So if you guys want to go to our YouTube channel, Donovan speaks about his relationship with Jack and how it organically form and how close they are now. And so I think it's smart for him to do that. You don't want people to people are naturally going to perceive you based on what they see, and then when they actually get to know you and see how organic he is and how, I would say, how genuine he is with the relationships that he seemed to be and wanted to actually earn their trust, earn their respect, especially as a football player, as a quarterback. You want to allow your work to earn their respect. You want to come in and necessarily talk. You want to allow the work and your performance to kind of lead the way. And it sounds like he's done that from everything that we've heard.
So as we digress, kind of from moving away from talking about Donovan Smith specifically, just to the overall Houston Cougars football team, 2023 season, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is going to be their first year ever as a Big 12 program. A lot of challenges. This is going to be the toughest schedule they've had in years when it comes to just the amount of teams that they have to play, who they're playing week in and week out. But we haven't done it on Pawd Slama Jama specifically, so Dayon, let's go through the schedule. And I've in other shows that I've done, like Folks Talking Sports in particular, Chris and Will give me a hard time because I realistically think that this Houston Cougars football team can win at minimum 6-7 games. Maybe I'm just being a homer, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that aspect. So let's get into it. Let's start week 1 against UTSA. Obviously, this upcoming Saturday, September 2, the Roadrunners, we know what happened last season when Houston had to go to San Antonio and play them. It was a hell of a game. Went to 3 overtimes. We know the story. How different? What do you expect from Houston this time when they open against UTSA, this time at TDECU Stadium?
I expect Houston to get out to a faster start versus how what they didn't do last year against UTSA. I think that will be a factor. I think the crowd actually will be electric. I'm expecting an electric crowd against UTSA. And UTSA, I think Frank Harris, their quarterback, I think he will play well. He lost his best receivers who transferred out, lost a couple others, but they still have a lot of talent. They hit the porter as well. But I'm expecting Houston to win that game, honestly. I think Houston comes out, rides the momentum. I think Donovan Smith plays really well. I think he spreads the ball around to Houston's receivers. And I think the running, the dual threat, the running back by committee will play well. I think we'll have a plethora of running backs that will play well. And Houston defense and turnovers will be the difference. That's what I'm expecting. Turnovers to be the difference. Donovan Smith just to play well.
I agree 100%. I think the biggest pause for concern when it comes to UTSA is the experienced quarterback in Frank Harris and just how much, not to sound redundant, but again, just how many games he has under his belt. That's always going to pose a challenge because he's seen multiple things, a thing or two when it comes to what opposing defense do to try to stop him. But I agree 100% with you, and most definitely when it comes to setting the tone for the season. I think that's the tone, whether it's good or bad for the Houston Cougars, will be set week 1 and how well they do against UTSA. And I'm also curious to see how much of the turnout is. We expect it to be a sellout when it comes to September 16th against TCU. We know that when Texas comes to town, that's going to be a sellout. I'd be curious to see what the turnout is against UTSA. First game ever as a Big 12 program, but UTSA, it's not those marquee matchups when it comes to the big names. I'm curious to see if they can get a sellout for week 1 or close to it.
I think so. I think they can. I don't know if it'd be a sellout to like the last sellout that we've seen with Louisville, like it will be with Texas, like we know. But I think it will be a sellout. I think the crowd, I think the Stewards are going to be electric for sure, like they always are. But I think the hype for the Big 12, along with the excitement from last year's game, if they, in my mind, if they advertise it right, in my opinion, in which they can to build the anticipation and the excitement from last game even more, I think they can reach a sellout. I think they can. In my opinion, I think the media department, I'm not saying this to call them out or whomever is in charge of that, but they can do so much better in advertising the football team in general.
Well, that 6 p.m. kickoff slated for Week 1, September 2 at TDCU Stadium against UTSA. We both say that that's going to be a win for Houston, so that definitely would be a good tone setter if the Cougars come out, especially if they impose their will and they look dominant in that game. On to Week 2, September 9th, the first road game for Houston, although it won't necessarily be a true road game. They're just going to be traveling 15 minutes down the street to Rice for Week 2. Now, obviously, these two programs played last year, and the Owls gave the Cougars everything that they could handle and almost were able to pull away a stunning victory. Literally came down to the final play of the game where I thought that they had connected on a last-second touchdown, but the receiver wasn't able to hang on to it, and Houston escaped with the win, this time at Rice. Another 6 p.m. tip-off. I think Houston definitely is not only going to win this game, but they have to send a message after last year's outcome.
Yeah, they blow out Rice. They blow out Rice. It's simple.
So right there, we were in agreement. We're 2-0. And now here's where things start to get a little dicey. And that's Week 3, the first conference game for the Houston Cougars this season. Again, at TDCU Stadium, Houston will be hosting TCU, the reigning college football finalist when it comes to their national relevance that TCU was able to establish last year. Obviously, a lot of a different team that will be in town for that one, but that's going to be the first Big 12 challenge. Like we mentioned, that'll be a sellout. It's going to be another night game. There's going to be a lot of hype around Houston finally being able to host a Big 12 opponent as a member of the Big 12 Conference. What you say, Dan, win or lose for that game?
That one's a tough game. I go back and forth on that game because I think TCU is going to lose their opener to Colorado. That's going to be somewhat of an upset to them. They're going to win that following week against, I think, Nichols. Then their first road game at Houston. Houston's riding on a 2-0. That's a tough game. I think Houston can win that game, but I don't know if I'm going to definitively say that they're going to win the game like I did against Rice. So, but I think it's a game that they can win. In my opinion, I'm not going to just pencil in a loss. Just because TCU is riding off what they ride last year. They lost a lot of players, a lot of NFL talent off of their roster, a lot of it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a game Houston can win. And that's not even me, this fan of Houston speaking. I just objectively watching college football, watching TCU. It's a game that they can win. They can win for sure.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's a game that they can win.
So it's a toss-up for you. I agree 100%. I see your viewpoint. We don't necessarily know what TCU is going to look like. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what they look like Week 1 against Colorado. I could see it. There's going to be so much hype. There's going to be a lot of buzz in that stadium for that game. First Big 12 conference game for Houston. But I'm going to stay consistent with what I've said since the schedule came out. I'm going to pencil that as a loss for Houston. So I have them 2-1. I think it's closer to a toss-up. I agree with you, but I'll go 2-1. And do you want to go 3-0 or do you want to go 2-1 for you?
It's a pick'em game for me. Just for I'm gonna go 3-0. I'm gonna go 3-0. But I'm not that high. I gotta see TCU.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game. TCU is not a Kansas State. They're not they're good and they got a lot of talent, but they're like matter of fact, I will go 2-1. Just objectively, we'll go 2-1. I think Yeah, we'll go 2-1. I think they can lose that game, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win that game.
So heading into week 4, we both have them at 2-1. I'll say this: if they're heading into week 4, 3-0, all that buzz for the Houston Cougars football program will be at an all-time high as they march against Sam Houston. That another TDSU game, September 23, 6 p.m. kickoff time. This even more so than Rice. This should be a lopsided victory for the Cougars. Agree?
I agree. They beat Sam Houston.
So now we both heading into the final game of September 30th at Texas Tech. This is going to be the first true road game for Houston, the first true game where they have to leave the city of Houston by this point. And it's a rematch of a season ago. They have to go up to Lubbock and play the Texas Tech Red Raiders. We both have them going into this game 3-1. Obviously, this will be the revenge game somewhat for Donovan Smith. Now he's going to be on the Houston sideline. He's going to be in very familiar territory. I think that finally, after, and we've been saying it seems like we say it every year, but I think finally this will be the year that Houston dethrones and topples Texas Tech. It's about time after the previous 2 meetings that have not gone Houston's way.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to say they beat TCU, but they lose to Tech. They lose their first losses to Tech. They're riding high on Tech, but it's just something about Tech, first road game. I don't know what Tech. I think they look. No, because I had got a friendly bet too. But objectively, I can't.
You don't see them being 5-0.
I don't see them being 5-0. I think they lose to Tech. I will go my score. I think they lose to Tech.
Gotcha. So you have them. We both have them at 4-1. I think potentially, depending on that TCU game, you could see them being 3-2. I think they'll be 4-1 at this point. I think they win out non-conference, and I think they win one of TCU, Texas Tech. So I think they're 4-1. You also agree that they're 4-1, potentially 3-2 because of that toss-up.
Yeah, TCU. Go 4-1. I think they beat TCU.
Gotcha. So we're both 4-1.
Yeah.
Heading into a bye week. They have a bye week after Texas Tech, and then coming off the bye, they host West Virginia on a Thursday night game, October 12th. And again, I think this is a win for Houston, West Virginia. In the bottom half of the Big 12 conference, they're actually picked dead last to finish in the conference when it comes to the media preseason poll, which obviously you don't take too much stock into that, but that just goes to show where that program, the aura of that program is heading into the season now. That could completely change by this point. We'll have a great idea of who Houston is and who West Virginia is, but I say it's a win. I think that's 5-1 for Houston at this point.
I agree. That's a win.
So here, no, something's wrong because we are stacking up these wins. So we both have them at 5-1, which again would
yeah, they're gonna lose. I got them losing their next 2 against Texas and Kansas State.
Gotcha. They do have a very top loaded back end of the schedule, which begins, like you just mentioned, October 21 against Texas. We both have the Cougars going 5-1 heading into this game. If Houston is indeed 5-1 at this point, and Texas, for the Longhorns, the expectations are sky high. They're favorites to win the Big 12 conference. They're expected to be not only competing for Big 12 championship, but among those top teams for a national championship outright. And this will be the first time that the Texas Longhorns visit the University of Houston campus in 20 plus years since the Longhorns were last on campus. I've been consistent about it since before even the schedule came out. I think guaranteed it'll be a crazy atmosphere. It'll be a sellout. Houston has been waiting this game. The fans, the old alumni in particular, longtime alumni, have been waiting for this for decades. I think Houston rides that high and they topple Texas. And at this point, based on my prediction, they'd be 6-1. What say you?
I thought they lose to Texas. Texas, too much talent. I think it's close. I think it's a close game. Last moment field goal, last moment drive. It's a close game, heartbreaker, where Houston fans are going to be happy that Houston fought hard and didn't get blown out. But I'm expecting Texas to get that W.
So then you have them at 5-2. I have them at 6-1. Which now, like they get through it. There might be a game here where they dropped it. They probably shouldn't. 6-1 is pretty optimistic. But now we get into that second half of the schedule, the loaded portion, and again, the road games start coming at Kansas State. That's a loss. I have that penciled in as a loss at this point of the season.
Most definitely.
So you have them at 5-3. I have them at 6-2. And the next game for Houston is in Waco at the Baylor Bears. Again, I have that being a loss for the Houston Cougars, dropping them to 6-3. What say you?
Yep. I got them. They're going to lose that one, I think.
So then you have them at 5-4 at this point. And now the Cougars return home November 11th against Cincinnati. A home game, former American Athletic Conference foes. This will be the first time that the both programs have met since the 2021 American Athletic Conference championship game. Very different look from both teams, and in particular when it comes to the coaching staff at Cincinnati. I think this is a game that the Cougars win after a 2-game skid. And at this point, they'll be 7-3. What say you, Dan?
Yeah, I think homecoming week against Cincinnati, they're going to, like you just said, they have a head coaching change. I expect Houston to beat Cincinnati.
So then that would put them at 6-4 for you. Like I said, I have them at 7-3. Now we'd head into the final home game of the season, November 18th against Oklahoma State. What say you? I think this could be closer to a toss-up for the sake of the wins, not to seem stack up. I'm going to say that they're going to lose that game. That would put them at 7-4 for me.
I'm going to say they win that game. It's been over the last few years, Oklahoma State has faded when you get towards the end of the year. They always start out hot, but then as the year goes on, they just seem to fade. And I think that's going to be something that continues. They're also having a new quarterback who transferred in. I can't remember from where, but I got Houston winning that game.
So at this point, we both have Houston at 7-4 heading into the final game of the season. And this is going to be a very brutal place to play. Another former American Athletic Conference foe at UCF in Orlando. That's always a hard environment to play in. The Knights are really hard to beat up there. And that's why Houston falls to finish the season 7-5. What say you?
Yeah, and that's a Gus Malzahn, Dana Holgorsen matchup. They both know each other really well. Yeah, a lot of history between those two guys. I really like Gus Malzahn as a coach. I love the way he motivates and gets his guys ready. Just something about the way he coaches. And I think UCF is going to win that game.
So we both have them at 7-5 to end the season, which would qualify them to play in a bowl game, which athletic director Chris Pesman has said is the goal for year one in the Big 12. Obviously, I'm sure the team has higher aspirations, but looking at the conference schedule, we both have TCU as a toss-up. You say they win that game. I have Texas Tech as a win. You have Texas Tech as a loss, so we flip-flop on that. They're 1-1, 2-1, 2-2. We have them at about 5-4 when it comes to their first ever conference schedule in the Big 12, around 500, which I think most Houston fans would be happy with if that's their first inaugural Big 12 season, especially if they defeat Texas. I know I have them winning that game, you have them losing that game, but what say you, around 500 for the first Big 12 season? Are you okay with that? Are you satisfied with that?
I would be okay with that. I would be satisfied with that. I think that would put Houston in a good enough position just to continue to build on the momentum of being in the Big 12. So I think following that, the recruiting would be continue to get better. Everything just around the football program, I think, will continue to get better. And I think he could view that as a successful season. I don't think we'll hear Dana come out and say what his expectations are, because that's something he hinted at last year, but never really specified what his expectations were. But I think for me, that would be a good year. I would like to see. I want to see Donovan, how he is for a full stretch of games and not looking over his shoulder. Do I think they still get Lucas Coley some pack. I still think he does, especially if it's a big win against Rice. I'm sure he'll get some. So it's yet to be determined. One thing I can't wait to say, I think when we were talking about different position groups, a lot of that I really didn't even know because it was just there's so many new players. And then after watching availability, then doing the research on more players, I think Houston's defense is going to be a lot better than they were last year. I think they got some really good players who can really, really make some plays. And one of them is AJ. How you pronounce his last name? Is it Halsey? He came over from New Mexico. I think he's going to be a star. I think he's going to be a star on Houston's defense on that back end. And so I'm excited.
Yeah, he comes with a lot of accolades in his first year with the Houston Cougars, and I tend to agree with you. And in particular, when it comes to the offensive side of things for Donovan Smith, I think it's a big benefit to him how solidified the offensive line is when it comes to, again, the two important positions, the center and the left tackle position. But I think kind of to what you just touched on with the defense, there are a lot of players that were brought in to beef up that offensive line, not only when it comes to the starters, but just the backups as well. That's something that Dana Holgorsen has said in the past. If you want to be a successful Power 5 program, you need to be able to have backups that can step in and not be a drop-off, be physically able to play the role. And I think Houston has brought in a lot of depth to be able to solidify not only the offensive line, but at various positions. We know that the receiving core is going to be stellar. They're going to be the one group that you feel confident about, at least right now, as of we're recording this August 27th, before a single game has kicked off. We feel really confident about the receivers, but with the consistency when it comes to the offensive line, the offensive line is going to determine how successful Houston's offense is, in my opinion. We've heard Dana Holgorsen mention throughout the course of last season, they struggled to be able to set the running game most of the games last season. That's going to be another point of emphasis for the coaching staff this season. If they are able to establish the run game successfully, that's going to just open up Pandora's box, a lot of versatility for Houston's offense, and they'll be able to put up a lot of points on the board in their inaugural Big 12 season.
Running game is definitely essential to the success of the offense. I think it'll be more of a zone scheme running game. Just looking back on last year, watching some Tulane games and Spears with the success that he'd had, and I think it's going to be a lot of zone running schemes, and which would be different how I used to have last year. And Donovan Smith, I think that he's going to have a big year, and he could potentially have a big year and leave for the draft with his measurables, with the way some of the tape that he has out there. If he can be consistent throughout the year, he can be a one and done type player in regards to being at Houston. But I'm excited for this Houston team. I think defensively they're going to really, really, really make a lot of noise. And speaking of depth, like you just said, that's what makes Sac Ave so good, because they had depth and can be able to have waves and keep their top guys fresh. And I think they'll be able to get back to that this year. I think with Cedric Williams in the middle, we didn't mention him last year, but I think Brandon Mack is going to have a really big year. And also David, who came over from Oklahoma. I think those two guys, along with Nessa Caesar, and along with Dye, just the numbers and strength they have in rushing the quarterback, being able to get pressure without blitzing and letting them cover, allowing the back end to cover and make plays, is really going to be to the benefit of the offense as well, because they'll get turnovers.
And a lone silver lining we can take away from the defensive performance last season is that there really is only one way for them to go, and that's up going forward. But they really will be tested night in and night out, especially in the back end of that schedule. So I think it's interesting to see how Houston's schedule has played out. I think there's going to be a lot of games for them to be able to work out some kinks right off the gate. UTSA will be a tough opponent, but Rice, Sam Houston, those could be some games, at least again on paper, where they could work through some things and hopefully build their confidence up once they get into the meat and potatoes of the Big 12 schedule. And again, if they're riding high, they're 5-1, 6-1, and they can upset a Texas, who knows from a confidence perspective what that can propel them to when they do get into that brutal stretch in the back end of the schedule. So again, exciting times. This is their first Big 12 schedule, and we're just anxious to see how the program does now officially a Power 5 school.
And who knows? Who saw TCU having a run that they had last year? I mean, I'm not going to say they're going to have that same run, but just looking at the schedule with the talent they've assembled, if Donovan Smith can have a big year, Houston can have that run. That's what's so beautiful about college football. We can have all these expectations, but it really takes one magical year. And we see it all the time in college basketball. They call it Cinderella. Mm-hmm. And so, I would be surprised if Houston did that. But just looking at the talent that they have and with the potential of Donovan Smith, if he's able to put it together with the weapons around him, the offensive line and what they bringing in, the running game and the defense, if it comes together like it can, and which is a huge if, but it's possible. I mean, who would have thought? No one that I know would have guessed TCU to have the run that they had last year. You look at the quarterback they had, Max Duncan. He's been there. He's seen a while. He played a lot, but he wasn't the starter coming into the season. But his experience, his ability to stay level-headed in games, which we talked about with Donovan, his ability to have that mental fortitude to fight through adversity and still come out on top. So he has those characteristics, and he got talent around him, a good offensive coach. I want to see what they can do, but I would be surprised, but at the same time, I would be like, I mean, it happens every year, so why not Houston?
Mm-hmm. The good thing now, Dayon, is that the time for talking is over. The games are right around the corner, and on that note, we'd like to remind everybody that Let's Rage Cougs is right around the corner. We'll be back on Saturday following the conclusion of Houston and UTSA, the inaugural game of the season. We'll see how the Cougars will be talking all about the Cougars and Roadrunners and what went well in that game, what went bad in that game, and anything else in between. So be sure to catch that now here on the Pawd Slama Jama YouTube channel as well this Saturday, shortly after the end of Houston UTSA. We would be remiss to not mention, of course, we'd like to send out our condolences, our deep condolences to the University of Houston Cougars men's basketball program and the Reggie Chaney family as well after the sudden passing of Reggie Chaney, which, Dan, I'm going to toss it over to you for your thoughts. But when I learned of the news, I had a pit in my stomach. I couldn't believe it. Such a just tragic event, tragic news that you had to see, and honestly just unbelievable that someone that's my age had his life cut short. Our deepest condolences to, again, the Chaney family and the Houston Cougars men's basketball program.
Yeah, it's just sad, man. Like you said, it's just sad to see someone so young. In my interactions with them, just seems so genuine. I mean, you hear people say it's nothing but good things about him, and in my interactions, this is exactly what I felt with him. And so my condolences to his family and friends first and foremost, and then to the Houston program, because there was his extended family. And so just surprised. And I mean, you hate to see someone so young transition into the next phase.
Mm-hmm. He was always willing to give his time. And like you said, he was always reliable when it came to media. And of course, we know how highly his fellow teammates and Kelvin Sampson spoke of him over the course of the seasons. And he'll forever be part of that Final Four team. But again, our condolences to his family and to the Houston Cougars program. On that note, we're going to close out. As always, Dayon, you get the final word.
Well, before I give those final words, I want to say that we're open for sponsorship. We have over 1,000 YouTube subscribers, have quite a bit of viewers who view our platform quite well. And so if you're interested in being a sponsor for us here on our podcast, and as well as our Let's Race Cougs, be sure to contact us. We're like to grow our platform. Let's do it quietly well. I want to pat ourselves on the back, but we're definitely open to sponsorship. And you can't end an episode without saying go Cougs.